The girl kneels before a bloated, motionless cow, its belly swollen like a drum, and with trembling hands she grips an iron spike and violently drives it through the stretched hide. The moment the spike is pulled out, a surge of foul, pressurized gas bursts out along with it. Ignoring the stench spreading through the air, she steps back and watches anxiously from a short distance. Moments later, the dying cow struggles to its feet, proving that the treatment has worked. Yet Beth feels no joy from this sense of achievement, because whether it is the livestock she carefully tends or the vast lands stretching endlessly around her, all of it, once meant to be hers, now has nothing to do with her anymore. 15 years ago, Beth was still a carefree young lady living with her parents in a manor in the countryside of Northern Ireland. Her father Billy not only owned large tracts of land but was also the owner of a local quarry, and the family of 3 lived a happy and comfortable life. However, one day, Billy discovered his wife's secret, that she had already been pregnant before their marriage, and the Beth he had always loved turned out to be another man's daughter. In a fit of rage, Billy decided to strip Beth of her inheritance, unwilling to let his estate fall into the hands of a child with an unknown father. At just 8 years old, Beth did not understand what losing inheritance meant, but her parents' fierce arguments filled her with fear. That night, holding a kerosene lamp, she quietly went into the study, hoping to look up the meaning of those words in a dictionary. But just as she read about losing everything, her father approached with a glass of liquor in hand. Billy did not clearly tell Beth whether she still had inheritance rights. Instead, he led her to the safe nearby. Beth knew her father was wealthy, but she had never imagined that inside was an entire drawer filled with gold coins. Billy grabbed a handful of coins and told her they were exchanged for 15,000 beaver pelts, and those pelts had been stolen from the French by his grandfather. Although Billy said that this fortune might one day belong to Beth, the betrayal of his wife continued to haunt him. After his wife died from illness, the vast house was left with only the father and daughter. Although Beth still held the title of a young lady, she had to wash clothes, cook, and do chores just like the servants. If it were only hard labor, Beth might not have wanted to leave this home. But one night after she had grown up, Billy came into her room drunk, whispering words that made her feel sick and even kissing her. That night, Beth fled to the maid's room in anger, preventing the situation from crossing an irreversible line. From then on, although Billy never behaved inappropriately again, Beth no longer wished to stay. She had no money and no one to rely on, and even if she left, she would not know where to go. So she waited for an opportunity, and that opportunity soon arrived. One day, she saw a man standing in the yard through the window, and with just one glance, her heart began to race uncontrollably. Liam said he had just seen a cow stuck in the mud and could not pull it out alone, so he came looking for help. Without hesitation, Beth drove a carriage with him to the scene, planning to use strong horses to pull the cow free. After tying the ropes, Liam pulled the cow's hind legs while Beth controlled the strength of the horses, and with perfect coordination, they quickly rescued the cow from the mire. However, having been trapped for too long, the cow had already lost its life. Liam brought Beth to a small cabin left to him by his uncle, which clearly had not been cleaned for a long time. Perhaps worried that Beth would look down on it, Liam hurriedly wiped the dust off the table with his hands, and though it was a small gesture, it made Beth believe he was a thoughtful man. They talked until sunset before leaving the room, and it was the first time Beth had ever been alone with a man, and she was convinced she had fallen in love. One day, while she was churning butter in the kitchen with a maid, Liam happened to drive past the door. After not seeing him for days, Beth almost rushed outside. The maid clearly understood men better than Beth, knowing that most of them had ulterior motives rather than genuine love. Beth wanted to tell her that Liam was different, but in the end, she could not bring herself to say it. That afternoon, she went alone to the cemetery and shared her girlish thoughts with her mother, who could not respond. Just as she was about to leave, Liam appeared. He invited Beth to come to his place that night, but she worried about being seen and talked about, since she was still unmarried. However, in order to be alone with the man she liked, she let go of her restraint and decided to take Liam to a secret place where no one would disturb them. At dawn, she quietly went into the kitchen, packed 2 pieces of bread and 2 sausages, and hurried out of the house. When she crossed the woods and reached the shore, she saw Liam already waiting, leaning against a tree. He politely let Beth step onto the boat first, then pushed it out before jumping aboard. But because he could not swim, he was extremely afraid of the water and nearly overturned the already unstable wooden boat. Their destination was a small island not far away, which had been part of Beth's mother's dowry and was the only valuable thing her mother left her. Besides the lush trees, there was also a simple stone cottage on the island. When her mother was alive, There had been a small rose garden in front of the house, but now it was long overgrown with weeds. After lighting the fire in the fireplace, Beth told Liam about her past. She said that she once held deep resentment toward her stepfather Billy. She resented his violence toward her mother and resented the suffocating affection he showed her, which went beyond that of a father. But for some reason, even though she hated him enough to wish for his death, she still loved him in some way. It was the first time Beth had opened her heart to someone, and when she saw the sympathy in Liam's eyes, she gave herself to him completely without holding anything back. She naively believed she had found true love, but when she casually mentioned the drawer full of gold coins in her stepfather's safe, Liam's eyes lit up, and he proposed a plan so shocking that it made her blood run cold. Liam then said something even more startling, claiming that taking a life was not the real issue, but escaping successfully was the greatest challenge. Beth never expected such cold-blooded words to come out of his mouth. She stated firmly and seriously that she would not take a life, and she did not want him to do so either, but Liam said it would not have to go that far. He said they only needed to secretly put enough of the liquid into the wine to make her stepfather sleep for 2 full days, and by then they could take the gold coins, cross the ocean, and start a new life in a place where no one knew them. Ever since her mother passed away, her stepfather Billy had rarely let go of his drink, but in recent years, he only drank during social events or celebrations, and the next time he would drink would likely be on Beth's birthday. Under Liam's persuasion, Beth ultimately decided to carry out the plan. She had lived in this home since she was born, and although she had thought countless times about leaving, when someone truly said they would take her away, a complicated feeling arose in her heart for reasons she could not explain. In the days that followed, Beth showed no sign of anything unusual and continued her work as usual. Although Liam occasionally passed by the front gate, he seemed to avoid suspicion and did not want others to notice their relationship. Each time, he stayed seated on the carriage and never came down to greet her, only occasionally nodding at Beth. One day, Beth asked a servant to bring in the village butcher to slaughter a sickly sow, but unexpectedly, when the maid went to fetch water, she was nearly assaulted by the butcher. Thinking quickly, the maid threw the scalding hot water onto the butcher's lower body and managed to escape, protecting herself.
He's a bad dog, that fella.
Blessing. He's strange, certainly.
After discussing the incident, the mistress and servant took bread and tea and went out to deliver food to the workers in the fields. Every day, they had to walk several miles doing the same repetitive task, and in the maid's view, it was no different from being a slave. But Beth did not see it that way. She felt that without this task, she would not be able to enjoy the warm sunlight in the fields, nor have the chance to chat with the maid like she did now. And in that sense, it was actually a pleasant duty. Beth almost let something slip and quickly changed the subject, but the maid still sensed that something was wrong, though she tactfully chose not to press further. After resting enough, they set off with the food and finally delivered the meal to the workers after half an hour. However, not long after the lunch was laid out, a mute drifter from the village suddenly appeared, and while the others shouted at him to leave as if chasing away flies, Beth handed him her own bread and tea without showing any sign of disdain. On the way home, after much hesitation, Beth told the maid the truth, saying that she was about to leave this house and could not go without saying goodbye. Beth did not say who she was leaving with or where she was going. She only told the maid that if anything unusual happened in the house during this time, she should pretend not to hear it. Soon, Beth's birthday arrived, and she barely slept the entire night, starting to pack her belongings as soon as dawn broke. Hearing a knock on the door, she quickly hid her suitcase under the bed and pretended she had just woken up. However, after the maid placed the wash basin and left, Beth looked worried, because her monthly cycle had been delayed for a month. Combined with her recent frequent nausea and vomiting, it was clearly a sign of pregnancy. At that moment, Billy's voice came from outside, telling Beth to come downstairs to greet the guests. The priest who had officiated her mother's wedding and had personally baptized Beth came specially to celebrate her birthday. While Billy and the priest were talking, Beth went to the garden to pick a bouquet of flowers and arrange them in a vase. But when she returned, she overheard the priest mentioning Liam. He said that the man Liam associated with was frightening, and that Liam himself was deeply sinister. Billy responded that they only bought filler and stones from the quarry and were not in any employment relationship, but the priest advised him to stay away from the two men. Though he did not explain the reason, Beth pretended not to hear and walked in holding the arranged flowers. The conversation inside shifted to her birthday. The priest gave her a collection of poems by the famous poet John Keats, and Billy also took out 2 tickets to a concert by a well-known composer. Billy did not expect Beth to refuse the gift on the spot. The reason she disliked it was that she thought the composer was foolish.
The whole world is singing his songs, the whole world city.
I don't care about what he does.
What do you care about?
John Keats.
What does he sing about?
Death, mostly. And nightingales.
To Billy, this should have been a joyful day for the family to celebrate together, but Beth's reaction left him deeply displeased. After the priest left, he took up the brandy locked in the cabinet and even filled 2 glasses. Just as he was about to leave alone for the concert, Liam secretly came to see Beth. Beth took out the pills she had prepared in advance, but since she did not know the proper dosage, she had not started grinding them yet. Unexpectedly, Liam told her to use all of them. Under Beth's shocked gaze, he continued, saying that as long as they got all the gold coins, they would take a train and then a ship early the next morning, leaving this place completely to begin a new life. He kissed Beth gently on the cheek as encouragement before leaving. After he left, Beth struggled internally for a long time, but in the end, she put all the pills into the grinder and crushed them into powder. She poured part of the powder into a glass, added water, and stirred it evenly, and the liquid looked completely normal and had no smell at all. To be safe, she also mixed a small portion of the powder into sauce and spread it over the steak and bread. After everything was ready, she hid by the window and watched anxiously until late at night. When Billy finally returned drunk, Beth calmly walked out with a kerosene lamp, pretending to be considerate as she handed him the glass of water, watching with her own eyes as he drank it and took a bite of the prepared bread. However, thinking of his wife's betrayal from years ago, Billy found himself unable to swallow. Seeing his pain, Beth wanted to comfort him, but Billy suddenly became agitated, cursing his wife's disloyalty and disgrace, because even he himself did not know who Beth's biological father was. Beth did not want to believe her mother was that kind of person, yet the undeniable sorrow in the man before her forced her to face this cruel truth. After Billy staggered back to his room, Beth's heart pounded wildly, and only when she heard his snoring did she finally act, successfully taking the key he always kept on him and opening the safe filled with gold coins. She carefully packed all the coins into a bag, but just before closing the safe, she discovered a will that Billy had written long ago. The moment Beth read its contents, she was overwhelmed with mixed emotions. She never expected that Billy had left his entire fortune to her, to this daughter who shared no blood with him. Even so, Beth still chose not to stay, and instead prepared to leave with the few belongings she had. Before leaving, she wrote a letter to Billy, expressing sympathy for his wife's betrayal while also writing about her dissatisfaction with the way he had treated her. But no matter what, she would miss everything here. After placing the letter down, Beth walked out carrying a heavy bag filled with gold coins. However, before she could reach the place where she was supposed to meet Liam, she was stopped by the mute drifter she had helped before. The man, looking terrified, pointed frantically ahead and gestured desperately to Beth, and when she still did not understand, he forcefully pulled her back. Since the drifter could not read or write, Beth had no choice but to take him back home temporarily and hand him paper and pen so he could draw what he wanted to say. From his anxious expressions and crude drawings, Beth finally understood, but the message sent chills down her spine and plunged her instantly into boundless despair. Through gestures, the drifter told Beth that when he passed through the woods, he saw 2 men digging a pit, and from the drawing, it was clearly a grave. What shocked Beth even more was that the drifter pointed at her, indicating that the grave was meant for her. He gestured again, telling Beth that he had heard them say her name with his own ears. Beth struggled to suppress the fear that was about to erupt and asked whether he had clearly seen the faces of those 2 men. The drifter quickly sketched the features of one of them, a man wearing a hat with a full beard.
Liam Ward.
When he nodded, Beth nearly fainted. She covered her mouth, trying not to cry out, but inside, it felt as if she had been cut with countless wounds. Beth could not believe that Liam, whom she had treated with all her heart, would cruelly plan to end her life. After calming herself, she asked the drifter to take her there, insisting she had to see it with her own eyes to know whether it was true. But the drifter shook his head in terror, clearly too afraid to return and unwilling to let her risk it. Beth thanked him for saving her life and told him not to worry, that she would not go anywhere. After the drifter left, she cried as she returned the bag of gold coins to the safe. But the clinking sound of the coins, along with her suppressed sobs, woke her stepfather Billy. Filled with rage, Billy grabbed a whip and struck Beth violently. In panic, Beth rushed out through the front door, but behind her, Billy's vicious curses echoed, telling her never to return to this house again. Crying as she ran without daring to stop, Beth eventually reached the birch tree where she was supposed to meet Liam. Deep down, she still held onto a trace of hope. wishing that the drifter had been lying, but when she saw the shovel nearby in a pit large enough to hold a body, she completely broke down. Beth stared in despair at the grave prepared for her, not knowing where to go next. With nowhere else to turn, she wandered through the woods for an entire night, and at dawn, she went to Liam's house. At that moment, Liam was anxiously waiting at the meeting place, worried whether she had been discovered while stealing the gold or had changed her mind. Yet all his worries revolved around the gold coins, not Beth's situation if she had been caught. From the very beginning, he had never been sincere, and there was no real affection for Beth. His true identity was not an ordinary businessman, but a member of a faction supporting Irish independence, and he had recently been involved in an attack in London. After learning about the gold hidden in Beth's stepfather's safe, he formed his plan, not to run away with her, but to bury her alive after taking the gold, and then use it to buy weapons and ammunition. Now, Beth finally understood that she had only been a tool for him, but she refused to accept it, refusing to accept that she had been deceived emotionally and nearly lost her life. Looking at the table where they had once used together in Liam's room, along with the half bottle of brandy, Beth could already imagine how they had plotted there to push her into that grave. She walked to the mirror and saw the blood on her forehead from being beaten by her stepfather, and the thought of revenge surged instantly. She picked up a damp cloth and wiped the blood from her face, forcing herself to calm down. But when she caught sight of the suitcase on the bed that had not been packed at all, the anger she had barely suppressed rose again. At that moment, she heard footsteps outside, and when she opened the door, it was indeed Liam slowly approaching in the morning light. Beth quickly shut the door, adjusted her clothes, and then lay on the table, pretending to be asleep. When Liam entered, he saw Beth, who should have been at the meeting, now in his house with visible injuries.
Jesus Christ. Did he get you taking it?
Yes, he caught me.
Following his words, Beth claimed that she had been discovered by her stepfather the moment she opened the safe. And not only did she fail to get the gold, she was beaten and driven out of the house. She held Liam's hand affectionately and told him that it did not matter if they had no money, because they were still young and could go somewhere unknown and start a new life. Beth deliberately ignored the reluctance on his face and even said that if he wanted the gold, he could go and kill Billy himself. Ignoring Liam, who was on the verge of losing control, she calmly told him that she was carrying his child. As expected, this news filled the man who had planned to kill her with guilt. But his tears of remorse could no longer move Beth, who now knew the truth. Since she had been driven out of the house, Beth said she would go to the small island her mother had left her to stay temporarily, and after he finished everything, he could come and find her and the child. And so, carrying guilt toward her and the unborn child, Liam decided to personally escort her to the island. They boarded the same small wooden boat they had taken before, with Liam steering once again, but this time, there was no affection left in Beth's eyes, only a cold intent to kill. When they reached the middle of the river, Beth suddenly said her shoelaces were loose, and after tightening both shoes, she abruptly stood up and began rocking the boat with all her strength.
Sit down. Jesus, you're tightled. Beth, I can't swim.
May God forgive you, my love.
Beth!
And me.
Beth! Beth!
As they both fell into the water, Liam struggled desperately, shouting for Beth, who could swim, to save him, but Beth watched coldly as the man floundered, until the surface of the water grew still and silent. Kicking hard beneath the water, she encouraged herself, determined to swim to the opposite shore. She wanted her unseen biological father, her deceased mother, and Liam, who had once tried to harm her, to see that even in such dire circumstances, she could survive with resilience. As she swam, she tore off the heavy, restrictive clothes she wore, and once freed, she felt lighter, relying on her strong swimming skills to finally reach the island safely. She tried to light the firewood in the fireplace to warm herself, but the matches were damp and unusable, and trembling from the cold, she could only wrap herself in a coarse blanket. After an unknown amount of time, in a daze, Beth heard someone calling her name, and gradually, she recognized the trembling voice of her stepfather Billy. Before this day, Beth had always been repulsed by Billy's physical contact, but perhaps because of the cold or because her heart had turned numb, she found his embrace unexpectedly warm. She cried and said that she had truly loved Liam, but never expected such a deadly betrayal. Beth openly admitted that she had killed Liam, and said that if she had enough courage, she would not hesitate to kill Billy as well. Because of everything he had done to her and her mother, Billy knew she was speaking out of anger, but then Beth revealed something shocking, telling him that she was pregnant with Liam's child.
Jesus God.
Even so, Billy did not abandon her and even proposed that they could marry. go somewhere no one knew them, and raise the child together. But those words instantly dragged Beth into the depths of despair. The place she had always wanted to escape from had ultimately become inescapable. Yet deep in her heart, the thought of silently ending Billy's life had never once disappeared.